Yeah, hi everybody, welcome back to the Gamesforum Online weekly webinar. I'm John Speakman. Today's webinar we're going to be discussing a topic that's very much at the front of mind for those working in ad monetization. That's of course in-app bidding. And don't forget, viewer, you can get involved and join the conversation with fellow viewers using the chat box to my right. So joining me today on the webinar, we've got Anwar Benatia from TapNation, Daniel Chernovsky from AppLovin, and Nate Barker from Kolibri Games. So to begin, I think it's best we give our attendees a chance to introduce themselves. Nate, start at the top. Could you introduce us to yourself and give us a bit of background?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Nate. I am the Director of Business Development at Kolibri Games. So I handle a variety of things from App Store relations to procurement to ad ops in some regards, and I've been working actually on the ad side for quite a while. Kolibri Games, for those of you who are unfamiliar, we used to be known as Fluffy Fairy Games. We rebranded relatively recently, about 2 years ago. Our main game is Idle Miner Tycoon. Idle Miner Tycoon is an idle game. The focus on it is to build your mines, build more mines, dig deeper, open up additional mines. It has about 2 million daily active users and around 10 million monthly active users. And about 3 months ago from when this is recorded, we were acquired by Ubisoft, which was really exciting for us. So we're now in the process of releasing, or developing first, a few additional idle games. Our main objective is to be the #1 idle games developer in the world. And so we'll speak mostly from the perspective of player-oriented idle games, and it's great to be here.
Brilliant, thanks very much for coming. Anwar, over to you if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. So I'm Anwar. I'm head of monetization and user acquisition at TapNation. So basically, I'm in charge of all the scale of its games, like Ice Cream, the game that we released 6 months ago. And I'm also in charge of all the discussion with the network, with the mediation, with the user acquisition side, with also the business partner. Some studios sometimes, some co-publisher in China, etc. So basically, I'm in charge of all this part of how we can scale a game. And to talk a bit about TapNation, we founded the company 1 year ago. So TapNation is a hyper-casual publisher mainly. And our focus is to put the tech on the middle of the table and try to scale the game and try to do everything with a high and I think what we can say is that the goal is just to put the tech inside of the publishing and try to automatize everything that we can and get the better margin that we can. So this is what we try to do since 1 year now.
Brilliant. And Daniel, last but very much not least, yourself.
Thanks. Hey everyone, my name is Daniel Chernovsky. I've been working for AppLovin for about 5 years now. Also been in ad tech luxury for 5 years. I run the European business of AppLovin. For those of you guys who don't know AppLovin started initially as a network. We've kind of expanded beyond that. We're now the largest or single largest growing game company in the world. That's providing capital for gaming studios. It's helping gaming studios grow as well through our products. I think what's most interesting going to be in this conversation is our mediation tool called Max, which is kind of pushed in-app bidding forward. So I'll be able to share some expertise from that side.
Brilliant. So we've got a variety of perspectives today. So I mean, it's an obvious place to start, but I think it's best for everyone if we can give our view on really very simple question: what is in-app bidding for those of our viewers who are not quite familiar yet? Daniel, actually, I'll let you kind of take a lead on this one.
Sure. So the idea of in-app bidding essentially is that you have a real-time auction where a request for an ad comes in. Basically, within the app, an ad is requested, and then you now want to give it to the highest bidding network. Most of you guys who work with waterfalls will know you work with a variety of networks. You work with us, you work with Facebook, with Google, with a bunch of partners. So obviously your goal is to create competition and get the highest possible CPM. Now, historically, this has been done in waterfalls where you consecutively ask someone willing to pay 30, someone willing to pay 25, and so on. Obviously, that has some inherent issues. One of them being if someone's not paying 30 and then the next one you ask at 25, maybe someone was willing to pay 27.5, right? In that example. Same thing goes, maybe you asked Facebook and Google, but you should have asked the other way around, right? So all these issues kind of lead to inefficiencies for what monetization stack. And in-app bidding kind of eradicates that, because in-app bidding essentially says, everyone give me your highest possible bid, and then whoever has the highest possible bid will get the impression. So that's the idea of header bidding or in-app bidding. Yeah.
Awesome, very succinct overview. And actually, kind of what struck me when I was actually researching this topic, why has the mobile games industry not been able to really settle on a defined name for, you see header bidding, in-app header bidding, in-app bidding. Why is that taking place? Like, why is there kind of these so many different variety of terms for this?
I think that's a good question for the branding teams. I think we started just calling it header bidding. I think that's the idea that it was, but then every network kind of came up with their own thing. It might have added to the complexity of the understanding of what it is, but it's always the same.
Yeah, I think one of the problems too is that with header bidding, it began on the web when you would put it in the header of an HTML page, right? So it's like right there at the top, and it has like a really literal meaning, which doesn't exist on mobile, but the core function is the exact same, which is before anything starts, we're just running the auction. And so I get chastised too by people who are like, why do you keep calling it header bidding? I'm like, because it was just header bidding for the longest time. That's what it means. But in-app bidding is technically true. I guess it just like confounds people, particularly if you want to be more pedantic. I don't know. I should probably stop calling it header bidding though, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, for the purposes of this conversation, we will stick with in-app bidding, I think. So, I mean, Nate, you just touched on it there. Header bidding has been around for years on websites. Why is it taking so long for? Why now? Why is it taking so long for the mobile games industry to start really adopting this on a widespread level?
Yeah, in a weird way, it seems like mobile advertising has to play catch up for the longest time with what's going on the web, and I think there's a few factors there. I think the biggest one was probably bandwidth to start, just because nobody had data. Like I was talking to somebody about how it's like funny now that we finally have like video. Like if I had a time machine, like I could go back in time, I would think and back to 2000, I couldn't even start a video ad network, and or I guess 2008, I couldn't start a video ad network on mobile because nobody had enough bandwidth to actually do that. Like there were problems with just loading, interstitials on data where, I remember I worked at an ad network and we would get complaints from people who were like, well, I don't have any data. I can't load these ads. The ads are tiny. They're like little PNGs. So that was holding people back. I think one thing that I think actually really propelled video forward is the fact that there was the introduction of rewarded video, right? So people could opt in and then had an incentive to actually start showing video. So before that, like most of the ad networks that were showing ads they were interstitial, and the rates that people were getting paid were relatively consistent across a lot of the networks. So there wasn't a whole lot of incentives to use mediation. And at the same time, in order for this technology to work, you have to basically be getting the bids early on. People have to understand how mediation works, and then you have to be downloading the ads. And I think because this all had to be done on device, this added maybe a little bit more to the complexity and the reluctance of developers to I guess, embrace it. Although I think maybe Daniel has probably a little bit more insight into like the network side, why it might be harder to get networks to sign on to become header bidders, because there's like two parts of it, right? There's the side that people have to agree to integrate this tech, but at the same time people have to build it. And so what you'll see with a lot of networks is they're ready. They have their they have the bidders, they have like the mediation set up so they can do this. But if XYZ ad network refuses to like release a bidder, then you're sort of SOL, if you will, and it just takes time for them to catch up. But yeah, I was just saying maybe Daniel has a little bit more insight onto like what it's like on the inside of the network for when that happens.
I mean, look, you said all the right things. From a technical perspective, obviously, like if you compare it to the header bidding desktop world, right, we're loading much deeper. Like we're loading videos. There's an end card. It's much more strained than just a banner, right? So that's one component of it. Obviously, you have to have your SDKs ready. But then I think it was also adoption. I think one of the reasons why we wanted to do it for us, I think for those of you who don't know the story of Max was a company that was initially founded by the founders of Mopub, who was then acquired by AppLovin. For us, the idea was we had at that time released our own gaming studios. We had Line, which was a publishing studio of ours, which was entirely ad-driven. So we needed to find a way to move forward in the ad tech space. And as I said, these little discrepancies in the auction having gaps, or knowing how exactly to stack the auction, who goes where, they can have pretty substantial impacts on your average CPMs, on your ARPDAUs. So that was super important for us, and we knew that header bidding was the way to get there. So we were very early on all for it. I think Facebook was not a company who, from the get-go, was all for it. I think Facebook's approach was quite clear. It's about fair access. We kind of see it the same way. I think networks all are moving that direction. If you look at any mediation in the last couple of months or half a year, all have started to adopt their own header bidding solutions. Now, I still believe that header bidding or in-app bidding is something that takes time to develop. We know it ourselves being a bidder in various mediations. Every mediation is their own environment. So there's a process that takes time, but I think it's inevitable given the clear advantages that it has.
Okay. And Anwar, what's your perspective as a publisher? Why do you think now's the right time?
In my opinion, yeah, I don't know if it's only about technical perspective that a lot of networks didn't start yet to do bidding. My point is that maybe I'm not sure because I'm not working with it inside of the team, but maybe Daniel, you can answer to that. Maybe some network, they don't want to put bidders because they are quite afraid of the revenue that they can lose by using bidding, because some of the networks, they can limit the amount of calls that you can do. And obviously, if you have a limited amount of call, you have limited limited volume, and you cannot, took all the potential of this network. I'm talking about Facebook before the bidding I'm talking about Google and some others. So I don't know if it's just about the tech part or it's also about business side.
So from our perspective, I'd say actually that we've seen that bidding for some networks currently we have, I think, 6 or 7 partners that are bidding in their system. We actually see that it helps them get more access, right? Because particularly if you're one of the smaller networks, you might not get as much priority from, let's say, from the pub side. You probably also don't have time to optimize every network. So it just gives you fair access. But for sure, you're right in that it becomes a completely fair competition, right? If you have the right algo, if you have the right demand, you'll win. But I think that's the interesting part about app monetization. I haven't seen a waterfall since we started this mediation where one network was taking 70% of your revenues, right? It's always split up between a variety of partners. So I think overall, from, let's say, a dev perspective, it's great. For us also as a game company, it's great because the more competition is better for everyone, right? More competition will always yield higher ARPDAUs. So I think we're in a transient stage. That's kind of my take on it.
And it's not, in your opinion, it's not about, the server cost, because when you are doing bidding, of course, you have to do a lot of calls versus classic waterfall setup. So it's also something that you think about when you are a network, or?
I mean, for us, honestly, I find it hard to speak for others just because we were completely pro it from the very beginning. We've been doing it for nearly 2 years now. We really believe in it. I think that that'd be more a question to, let's say, the other guys.
Cool. Nate, anything to add from your end?
I think the comment that Daniel made about how it's good for networks because they're now getting more access is completely true. There are literally networks that we have taken out, multiple networks that we've taken out in the past or would have nothing to do with because it was just too much work. And now for us, because we don't have unlimited resources, and I think a lot of developers don't have unlimited resources to spend on ad updates and SDK updates. It is so incredibly easy to just plug in a bidder and then kind of forget about it. As long as it's not crashing constantly. Even if the revenue is low, we sort of just let the thing go. Like, fine, whatever, like, we'll leave it in there because it's not an impact enough that we should actually take it out, which for the networks is actually a pretty huge advantage, because if you get enough of those guys, who are just willing to let things run without interference, they actually get a tremendous amount of traffic. So from that perspective, yeah, we're super happy with the change that made, and our developers are happy too.
Yeah, do you think your perspective there is, like you mentioned, like for you, it's not worth the kind of that effort and that resource to kind of have to worry about it all the time? That's obviously because of your part of the market as a casual publisher, right? If you're in a hyper casual space, then surely you might have a different viewpoint. And anything you'd like to add from that point of view?
In fact, I have the same point of view. As you said, now in the market, we have maybe 20 different networks. And for some of them, it took a lot of time to create the floors on the both sides to check if everything is correctly integrated, if the CPM are correct by country, by OS, etc. And yeah, as you said, in our case, I have now in my waterfall some network in bidding. And if there was in classic setup or old school setup with a floor, etc., I will definitely not put them in the waterfall, because it's just incremental. Basically, yeah, when you add a network in bidding, in fact, it's just incremental, because you just put the ID, you just put the adapters if you are using a mediation, and that's all. You don't have to manage them, you don't have to check by country, etc. And yeah, I'm agree with Nate, yeah, definitely.
You also have to consider, I think, different publishers have different amounts of apps, right? So for example, Nate is on one side of the spectrum where there's one app that they're fully focused on, but then there are hyper casual publishers and devs who have 10 games to manage, right? Like TapNation has a bunch of games to manage. Like if you look at someone who's at the very end of a spectrum with Voodoo, they have hundreds of games to manage. And historically, sure, you can set an employee down and he can run through the waterfalls, talk to the networks, get the uplifts, and you can get 10%, 5%, depending on how good your waterfalls are, through these manual optimizations, right? But it also becomes an ROI question on your organization. Does it make sense to go for all the effort if you can do that by plugging in bidders? And that's generally what we've seen. I think the ARPDA uplifts, when we A/B tested different bidders, like Facebook is a good example. Like oftentimes we get 10% ARPDA uplift just from putting Facebook from network to bidding. So if you can create these types of wins for your organization by hitting a button rather than spending hours on it, I think it will drive business for everyone.
Yeah, in fact, I'm totally agree again with the fact that more network in bidding will save a lot of time to us when you are doing UA and monetization. And right now, in my side, on the monetization side, I'm just waiting to have more network in bidding. I heard that a lot of them that are currently working on it, like Vungle and Unity and some other network that are working on it, and they will release her bidding beta in 6 months or something like this. And I'm quite impatient, because the other point that you have to know is that when you are doing monetization, a lot of the time you have to update the floors, you have to check if everything is correct. And when you are doing massive UA, when you are scaling a game, $1 on the eCPM can represent thousands of dollars in revenue. And definitely when you put bidding, you avoid all this stress, because you don't have to check with the network, you don't have to talk with the account manager to check which floors you have to put on the first position, etc. It's totally automatic. It's totally, it's 100% transparency, and you don't have to, you don't have to negotiate or something like this. And you know that you will have 100% of the potential of the network, even if it's a very small network. As Nate said, it's totally incremental, and you just have to plug it, and that's all.
Yeah, it certainly makes our QBRs with our networks very short conversations with their own bidders. It's like, okay, you happy? Yeah, we're pretty happy. Okay, cool. It's probably less going on. And from an operational perspective, it's saved us a ton of time. I hope I'm not skipping too far ahead.
No. I mean, my next question was going to be, what are the big advantages of in-app bidding over manually optimized waterfall, right? So I think we're absolutely touching on resource, time, efficiency. So I think it's it's a great conversation.
Yeah, it's so for us. It was interesting because we switched over And there was certainly like a period where we were learning. We also briefly went back with Facebook as a test to see on one side how they worked. So they worked for a while at Bitter, and then we put them briefly back on a waterfall, and the performance declined again when they were on the waterfall. For us, it was great because it kind of proved that the operational savings went hand in hand with the increase in revenue, which was huge, right? So we're really fortunate because so we use Max, and one of the tools that we use is the A/B testing. So we got really, really deep into A/B testing for a while, right? Where we wanted to see like, okay, this waterfall and these line items, and like, let's change this by like $1 and like these 6 countries. And we still do that to some degree, but the amount of that we need to do is significantly lower. So, you know, just having that saving operationally is great, because then we can redirect those resources elsewhere. And they're still in ads, right? So we still have, we have our head of ad ops who had previously been doing that. Now we can focus on new things. So we're looking at what are some better placements, just like within our game, right? Because in our game, since the chief conceit is manipulating money and time, like we have only so many different ways that we can actually do that using rewarded video. But we want to explore and try and optimize all of those, or try and add new ways where players can save time, earn more money. So we can actually focus on coming up with these now, right? Instead of having the same ones that we've had for 3 or 4 years, we can come up with new ones. And we can also figure out new in-app purchases or you know, modifiers on the ads, right? You could say buy a permanent boost on all of your ads. And these are types of things that we can begin to actually test. Whereas before we were juggling networks and things were breaking, we had to get specific contracts, like all this, you know, legalese you have to read through to try and like, it basically wastes everybody's time to have these waterfalls. So it was absolutely huge. And the increases in revenue, I think, were also pretty. So we saw in some cases increases from like 5 to 20% to ARPDAL, depending on the country and platform, which is, you know, not an insubstantial amount, and also is helpful. I think I don't want to talk too much about the current pandemic situation that is consuming all of the
people
attention
love to hear how it's affecting them.
Sucking the air out of the room, right? Yeah, it's like, well, you're not going to have a Zoom webinar without somebody mentioning COVID. But one thing that the pandemic is doing is it's rapidly changing where spend is going and what performance is like. And of course, nobody can expect this. And on the business side of things, not having to then shift all of our resources to managing lower elements of the waterfall as CPMs decline with some networks means that we can again save additional time. Because if everybody, say, I'll pick on Facebook for a second, right? They're a huge partner of ours. If Facebook CPMs start dropping because, say, there's less competition as there are fewer travel ads being shown, right? CPMs drop, or maybe impressions also increase because we have more people playing. If this was 2 years ago, we'd then have to go through and start testing Facebook at every single CPM, you know, below that. You don't have to do that now because it's just bidding. It can fluctuate, you know, more organically, I think, which is cool for us.
I'd like to touch on 2 points that Nate actually made. So the first one is the organization one. Truth is, the conversation that like I used to have 3 years ago with some of my partners weren't particularly strategic. The ROI that I was providing wasn't particularly high, right? Because I'm just one of 10 schmucks who tells you to add another zone. So I think this has changed massively because obviously even in a non-fully bidding world, the conversation shifts a little bit. So I can see, for example, now from a mediation perspective, obviously we still run all these A/B tests, and I'll get to that in a sec, but we can now allocate more time to help partners understand, let's say benchmarking is a good example, right? So you have 5 different rewarded placements. This is the ad viewer rate that you have per placement. How does this stack up against everyone else? You have, this is your interstitial frequency. How does that stack up against others? Is that a focus area of yours, or should it be one? I think it frees up time on both our side and on the partner side to kind of be high ROI in their actions. So I think that's actually a huge advantage. But I will also say, I think we're kind of dreamers in a way that we want everyone to be on bidding, right? Some of the big partners, Unity is a good example, Vango was mentioned, AdMob within only their own mediation, like not everyone is there yet. So right now we live in this hybrid world. And the hybrid world has its specifics. And I think what Nate mentioned with A/B testing is a crucial part of that. So as I said very early on, I think the two main issues that waterfalls always had was you have gaps in waterfalls and you can't close the gaps, because if you have a waterfall, there will be 30, 29.99, 29.98, till you get an answer. So much time would pass between server communication, right? Because every time a server asks another server, do you have an ad? So that will create latency. Latency is what we call how long it takes to fill an ad. Mm-hmm. So if you have too many positions in the waterfall, you will sometimes, maybe you guys have seen it when you played an app, you sometimes click what's your rewarded ad and there's no ad available, right? When an interstitial just wouldn't show up. So that has always been a significant concern to any monetization manager, which is why they had maybe 25, maybe 30 calls in the waterfall, and that's it. So now you have 30 price points between X and 0 to kind of fill, which is inefficient. So, okay, so now let's say you can take over half of your revenue out. You have AppLovin, you have Facebook, you have Mintigo, you have all these partners who are bidding, so they're out. Now you have the same amount of positions that you can fill with other partners, but some of the questions still remain, right? Who do you put where? What do you do? Which price points do you use? Obviously, you have less of a work, but it still exists. And one of the things that we always saw was that it's kind of random, right? Let's say Nate and I would have had a conversation 3 years ago. I tell him, look, man, we have great demand. Why don't you stick us up in the US at $35? He puts us in at 35. Our revenue increases, his revenue increases, but he can't really compare both cases. Maybe it's the weekend, maybe seasonality kicked in, maybe something else happened, right? So there was never a real way to assess whether the change that you've made, and specifically the change that you've made, has increased your revenues. So what you needed to create was an environment in which you can test in parallel. Okay, this is the waterfall I have. This is the variation with it I want, and now I compare the two, right? So this is what we pushed with A/B testing, and it's something that, let's say, on Max, everyone's using frequently. Nate is a good example. Kolibri went to town on it. Like TapNation does the same thing. Like you guys probably still run on every game. You run, from what I know from you run probably one test every week at the very least, probably even more so. And all these tests are incremental, right? You add 2% here, you add 3% there. But it also changes your relationship with the networks that aren't on bidding, because now it's much more mutually beneficial, right? If I give advice that is not beneficial to the pub, they'll see it right away, right? So I think, and that's actually something that being, let's say, a BD, or having been a BD person for, well, still a BD person for network, what I'm most proud of is like the relationships that we build with partners and the relationships that we allowed people to build with other networks for Max has been very different to what it used to be. And I think that's a great insight for the industry.
Okay. Anwar, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just to conclude on what Daniel said, yeah, I think the bidding, he changed also, you know, all the job that we have, like as a monetization manager, as an account manager at AppLovin, as he said, you know, when you are working with mediation, it was AppLovin or ironSource or MoPub, you have to deal in the same time with your mediation and also with your network. But since AppLovin is bidding now, you know, you don't have this discussion. All the discussion that you have, it's only about how we can improve our revenue. And the discussion is more transparency, and it's quite better, you know, because as you say, let's say like 1 year ago, when I was talking with my account manager, I have to talk about the position of his network and also about all the other network that we have to plug, etc. So it's quite complicated, you know, to manage this relationship with the mediation, with all the network that we have, because we are talking with like almost like 20 network on the same time. And right now it's quite better because you don't have to talk with all the bidding network. You don't have to negotiate with all this bidding network, and you can allocate more time to the network which are still in waterfall, like Unity, Vangle, and all the other one, AdMob, etc. With now, because of Facebook, of AdColony, of InMobi that are in bidding, you can allocate more time to manage this other network, and you can do more A/B tests, definitely. Now it's quite better for us to do A/B tests on only one network. We can do 1 a week or 2 a week. it's quite easiest, because before that, even if you can do A/B tests, as Daniel say, you have the latency, because sometimes we'll add 2 networks here and you will delete 2 floors on the other network. So you don't know exactly why the revenue is increased. You don't know exactly why. But since we have almost 50% of the revenue, which is bidding, you know with better precision which network is influencing which ECPM on which country in which OS. It's quite better, yeah. And it changed the work, because I don't know when all these other networks will be in bidding, but let's say in 2 years, we will not have monetization manager, you know. The monetization manager will not be an operational guys who will put all the floors, etc., and all the ID. The monetization guy will only be a guy who will think about how can I put the good frequency of ads, where can I put a good rewarded in the game, you know. He will think more about the product than the operational things. And as Nate said, yeah, you can save a lot of time. And in our case, yeah, I think I saved on the monetization part almost the 50% time, yeah. And now I can more focus on, okay, this is the frequency. I have to think on ice cream, in which moment we have to suggest a rewarded, in which moment we have to put an interstitial, etc. And it's a game changer, yeah, definitely.
That's precisely it. And I think one thing that you were saying that was really resonates is that we have eliminated like a fair amount of the kind of confusing conversation around just like mediation, right? Because header bidding or in-app bidding, it is transparent by
in-app
nature,
bidding,
right?
In-app bidding. We're sticking with in-app bidding.
In-app bidding. In-app bidding is transparent, which makes it better, just because everybody, like, the tech all has to be vetted, right? So before, you know, the networks come on, they want to understand how like the bidding works for all of the in-app bidding. So all of the ad networks are satisfied with the way that this works. And what that means is that from a business perspective, if you're talking to your rep for an in-app bidder, we've sort of eliminated what used to be the conversation, which is like, okay, so it's great. How do you monetize? Then that becomes actually confusing, right? So some networks would be like, okay, we're going to take every like 63rd ad, or like we're going to charge like X percentage, or like you have to guarantee us this amount of revenue. And it's just like, it becomes like this mind-boggling calculus that I'm clearly not smart enough to like understand. But now, with networks that are doing in-app bidding, 99 times out of 100, they have their own network that's in there, and it's completely transparent. So it's getting traffic when it's winning the auction. The network that's providing the bidder, it's not getting traffic when it can't win the auction. There's no like tomfoolery. So I think also to Daniel's point, a big part of that's been awesome for us is it shifted the conversation with particularly like our mediation reps. So I can give a shout out to mine. It's Tony, who's done an awesome job at actually helping us understand the ecosystem. So we know like which networks are performing well here, and he's quite, I think, forward about suggesting situations that may not benefit his network in the short term, but benefits the publisher, because we're showing the ads and we're incentivized then to just stick with something that's going to generate more revenue for us. And then it basically pushes the onus on to get more traffic, right? The onus to get more traffic on the networks themselves. They just need to deliver, which really simplifies things, I think, for business too. So it's not just like, you know, how am I going crazy with the waterfall? It's also a little bit of like, you know, now I don't have to worry about such like, you know, bizarrely constructed deals. It's much simpler, and we can focus on things anymore. What's that?
I kind of like, I mean, I know that this is a much better world that we live in, but like, I'm not gonna lie, like part of me misses the whole negotiation and deal part. I think that's the old BD soul, but relationships have definitely changed. Like I think the way that we kind of look at each other is like we're game consultants now. I think that's really it. Like we're not admonization deal brokers, we're game consultants, and I think that's kind of where, like, I think Anwar, Nate, you're kind of also moving that way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And no, I'm totally agree, in fact, with what Nathan said. And the last point is that, yeah, it's totally changed the relation with the mediation to talk not only about the network, but we are working with AppLovin, as you know, Daniel, and now the relation with Cyril or Luba, which is our account manager, is totally more about the product and more about the ecosystem, etc. Than it's not really now, you know, a business relationship. It's more, yeah, really a consultant. It's more about Luba and Cyril, they became a consultant for us because all the advice that they give, it's not for AppLovin, because AppLovin is bidding right now, so they cannot do more. So everything that they said, it's at 100% dedicated to us, and yeah, it's big game changer for us.
Yeah,
I think that was kind of always the point. Like the concern that I always hear when you talk to someone who is not, let's say, as convinced or has made the experience like you guys have, is always, yeah, but I mean, bidding is just a way for you guys to take all of your own traffic, right? That's always like the first thing that you hear. And to be fair, like if you don't know the world, I think to some extent it's a fair concern. Obviously, like that, I mean, there are many reasons why it isn't true, but the simple one is that if we were to do that, it would be incredibly short-term play, right? Like if I try to increase my share of voice, everyone will notice, no one will trust our mediation. But also it doesn't make sense for us as a business. Like if you think, let's say from AppLovin's perspective, our gaming business is much larger than our network business, right? So we build products that benefit our gaming business. So any product we build that will increase the revenues or the ad revenues of our gaming business will have a significantly larger impact on our business than increasing our share of voice on the monetization side by 2%. It's just not a thing. But I also think that most mediation, every mediation that is using bidding has to go through transparency checks. Like someone like Facebook would never work with anyone who wouldn't be fully transparent and wouldn't be fully fair. So I understand, like coming from this deal world, you know, where like everyone's trying to kind of win over the other one. I understand that this is a concern, but I really believe that this is like, there's a paradigm shift to some extent. Like this is a new world. Like there's no, I'm winning, you losing. That doesn't really exist anymore to that extent. Like to make an example, I think with some of the games that we saw move over, we saw our share of voice actually drop because we added more networks, we had more people in a more competitive environment, and our share of revenues dropped. But that's fine. If the ARPDAU increases, that will be immediately put back into UA, the game grows, and we'll have a smaller piece of a larger pie. That's perfectly fine for us. But yeah, I do think that it doesn't make sense to kind of look on the new world with the old perspective of I'm trying to win something over you. I don't think that exists anymore in that way.
And it changed everything, basically.
We're good.
On our side, yeah, it changed everything, because when we talk with our account manager, yeah, we know it's totally dedicated, yeah, to us.
Nate, you in agreement?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It's also just like a huge relief because you can focus on other problems, which is good. Like the amount of time we spend on these types of things now is pretty minimal. So we can then go back to building games, which is sort of our main objective.
That #1 goal all along.
Yes, precisely.
Cool.
And it means that, you know, when we do release new games too, it's simpler when we think about what the ad stack is going to be. Like, I'm sure if you're hyper casual, this is like a much bigger deal than for us. But it used to be like, you know, we had a long process just when we were releasing a game. Okay, well, let's see. We'll start with Unity, and then we have to put in this like other mediator, and then what's 2 networks we're going to try, and 3 networks, just because you have to like slowly ramp up how much attention. And now it's like that's sort of irrelevant, and we can kind of focus on just making it actually a good game instead of messing around with the ad networks.
Yeah, true. It's a totally good point, because as a hyper casual publisher, we test a lot of games, and yeah, when we want to do a soft launch and, you know, check the average LTV that we can get, etc. 1 year ago, we have to put all these 5 networks. We have to create all these floors on all these different networks and put them in the mediation. And sometimes it took a lot of time versus the result of the game, because we're testing a lot of game. And right now it's more simple, because if we want to put 5 networks, we just have to put 5 IDs, and that's all. And we don't have to think about if the KPI are not correct or not, because it's bidding. So we directly have the good results, and it's a lot of time where we are doing a lot of soft launch, and all the hyper casual will note that now it's quite easy to get average estimation of the LTV, etc. versus the previous system where you have to put all these floors to have a kind of accurate waterfall. Now, 1 year ago we have this way of doing like a first setup of waterfall, basic waterfall, and then start to optimize it, etc. But right now we know that we will have our stack of bidding network, and this one they will never change. And after that we can more deeper in all the other one. And it's a lot of time when you have to.
Particularly with the hyper casual, I think it's a pretty interesting case because you always have to think about like what's your competitive advantage, right? Like TapNation builds amazing, very like complex but interesting high LTV hyper casual games. Idle Miner has kind of changed Idle completely, also from an LTV perspective. But there are also a lot of hyper casual games that kind of follow the same structure, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at, let's say, all these games are UA driven, so then it becomes a model. Here's your conversion rate, here's your CPI. Your CPI is a result of what's your LTV. So there are companies, and I still think that today there are companies, and we see it on our own end as well, that benefit in this ecosystem because they have a higher LTV, even though users watch the same amount of ads, users have the same quality, they have a better LTV because they have better monetization, right? Because their waterfalls are set up better, or they used to be set up better. We don't believe that a stronger waterfall should be your competitive advantage. The competitive advantage in our ecosystem should be the better game. So what we see on Max is like, we've seen that like if someone moves over from an mediation, we see like 10 to 15%, sometimes 20% uplifts in ARPDAL on, let's say, a strongly developed ecosystem, right? On like a strongly developed waterfall, that's kind of lift that we see. So these guys get a competitive advantage, right? So I think in the long run, once everyone's bidding and once I think monetization or ad monetization, waterfall management will become less important. I think, and this is the world that we should live in, is one where the game quality will define what are you on the top of the charts. How much do users like your game? That should be the defining criteria.
A true meritocracy again.
Oh, I want to ask a question of Anwar. You guys have interstitials, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have like a sense of like I'm curious for you guys if like you have like a playbook or sort of like best practices for balancing interstitials and rewarded, or like how you choose, what you're doing with interstitials so as to not, annoy players too much. Yeah,
but basically, as you know, in this kind of hyper casual, just like ice cream, which is what we can call, simulation and satisfying games, the goal is to don't annoying the users. And basically it's quite hard because the volume of rewarded on this kind of game is quite low, and we have to put interstitial if you want to be profitable. And the only advice that I can say it's A/B test. We made a lot of A/B tests, and you have to do, it's just about logic. Let's say you will put a frequency of 10 seconds, you will have a lot of ads but a very bad retention. And if you put 1 minute frequency, you will have a highest retention but a lower ad view per user, impression per user. So you just have to do A/B test and find find the good frequency and about the placement for the interstitial. It's just about find the good frequency between each level. If you have games like with the 2 or 3 steps, now we have a lot of games like this where you have 2 or 3 steps of gameplay. Some of them they will put 1 interstitial after each step. Other one will put 1 interstitial at the end of the global level. So I think I hope they are doing A/B tests, and I think this is what they do. And for the interstitial, it's just about A/B tests. For the rewarded, I think it's more deeper than that. When you do a rewarded in hyper casual, you have to think the whole project. You cannot just create the game and say, okay, at the end of the level, I will put a rewarded, or let's put the game and let's find where we can put rewarded on the shop. For no ads, for in-app purchases, etc. You cannot just add rewarded like this. You have really to think about the project. And if I can talk about one game, it's Rolik made a game about football, American football recently. And basically, if you want to watch a rewarded, you have to click on the players, which is quite smart. And Say Game is doing the same with the cooking game. it's not a button, it's not a rewarded button, but it's a part of the game, when you click on the rewarded. It's quite smart, they really think about the rewarded before they create the game. And this is definitely what the user have to do. And I think on the idle, I don't play idle so much, so I cannot talk, but I think that the monetization with the rewarded is quite more deeper in the idle games. And you think a lot about this before you create the game, so you can say more about it. But on the hyper casual, the next step is it's really to think the game before you create it. Think how we can integrate the max amount of rewarded with real rewarded also. You have to put a real reward, and this is the point. It's quite hard, and you have to be very product oriented. But this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I actually think we're just about out of time, but anything left to add, Nate, Anwar, or Daniel? How would you kind of conclude the major advantages of in-app bidding?
So I'll say this. I'll say I think the two guys who are sitting here with me will confirm there are technological advancements that will lead to more money, right? So this is out of question. Like it will be 10, it will be 50%, it can be more. It is a significant improvement that in-app bidding will yield. Obviously, what I will say is it's something that needs to be tested, and you have to understand that every bidding environment is different, right? So the results that you'll see on Max will be different to the results that will be on MoPub or other mediations. Everyone will have to make their own experiences. The one thing that I will just say as a piece of advice is test. Now, I think most publishers have a wider variety of games than they used to, which means there are more opportunities to test. There's tech out there, and companies like ourselves can help you figure out how to properly test. So it all just comes down, sure, the relationships matter, and the expertise is super important, but you also have to weigh the opportunity cost of deciding one mediation versus the other, one network versus the other. And I think the transparency we're getting to just forces people to test. So what I'm quite proud of is that like over the last 2 years, I think most monetization managers have become much more open to testing. I think Max had something to do with that people have run different mediation. They're deciding on the mediation, having seen hard data. So my advice to everyone would just be, get the data, make an informed decision.
Awesome. Anything to add, Nate, Anwar?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is inevitable that we'll all end up with in-app bidding as the primary delivery mechanism of our ads, and I think testing is definitely a good piece of advice. I think an important part is to start to, depending on the size of your team, basically to start thinking about how you're going, like where you're going to integrate in that person who is currently managing the ad relationships and the waterfall, because it's essential, I think, now to start thinking about, okay, if maybe this is a bit like a little bit too competitive, but if we're creating now a level playing field when it comes to all of the networks. Now the real challenge is going to be stuff along the lines of placements, frequency, incentivization. If you're doing rewarded, like we'll have to start getting smarter and smarter about these types of things. And the companies that were winning 2 years ago because they had the best mediation, in 2 years from now, or maybe a year from now, the companies that will be winning will be the ones who have already put that behind them because they have in-app bidding and are now thinking the most clearly about how to put ads in their games.
Yeah. And I know about the final word to you.
Yeah, I think if I have to conclude about header bidding or in-app bidding, I think it's 3 points. The first time it's a no-brainer. It's we can see in, I think, the 100% of app who move from waterfall to bidding, we can see an increasing of the revenue by 5 to 20%. It depends on the game, etc. The second point is the main important for me is, as Daniel said, it will cut one of the big competitive advantage that other one have. With bidding, the only competitive advantage that we have is about the game and about how you do the UA. And this is the main point that we have, because I'm pretty sure that 1 year ago, you can have, you can put a game from being not profitable to profitable because of the waterfall management. And as Daniel said, now it's already live, and I think it will be more true in 6 months or 1 year. The only competitive advantage, yeah, it will be the game. It changed everything, because you will not be like, yeah, you will be focused only on the project, and that will change everything. Yeah, so it's no brainer increasing the revenue, and we can saw it in all the games that we test. It will cut a big competitive advantages because we'll be focused more on the UA in the project. And the last part, yeah, it's saving a lot of time. It's saving a lot of time, because when you have more than 60%, 50%, and I think 80% in 1 year of your revenue in in-app bidding, you will have most time to think about, as Nate was saying, about the project, about the placement, about the frequency, etc. Because unfortunately, yeah, it's the thing that we cannot think a lot right now. When you have a small team, etc., you have to split your time between how can I optimize the waterfall and how can I do the better relation that I can with the network. And in the other side, you have also to think about how can I manage the A/B test with the game, how can I manage the frequency, the placement, the product, and yeah, definitely you lose a lot of money, of course.
Well, that's all we got time for this week. Hopefully, you found this discussion very informative. Nate, Anwar, Daniel, thank you very much for joining the Gamesforum weekly webinar. Yeah, look forward to seeing everyone next week. See you later. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.